Hey people, welcome to UPSC Hacks. Hey guys, welcome to UPSC Hacks. I'm Amaresh Nashi. I'll be teaching economics for you guys today. We are trying to finish the economics syllabus for the whole UPSC. It is helpful for both prelims and mains. For almost every year, there's about 15 to 20 economic related questions or the concept related questions. We will be targeting those. This is about the gist of what we are trying to do here at UPSC Hacks. Basically a brief history about me. I'm an engineer who has turned into a finance geek. I've done my MBA from the University of Colorado Boulder, and I've been working with a couple of MNCs, and was also briefly a professor at a university here in Bangalore. And I have been doing this video in English primarily because that is a common language that we know, and also because I have seen a lot of other channels where Hindi is primarily used, but this one is going to be used using English. So I remember recently when I was traveling in the Patna railway station, I think someone came up to me and asked, "Are you a Madrasi?" I am like, "No man, anything below Maharashtra is not Madras. I am actually from Bangalore." So guys, this is for everyone, and there are a lot of us who do not know the Hindi. And I believe there's only there's about a couple of states who have official language as English. I think that is Nagaland. So getting into the gig right now, we will start off with economic systems, but then we need to know what is economy before we get into economic system, guys. So what is economy? So economy, you can see, as I can show you on the screen, has evolved from the barter system. So what is barter system here? Barter system is a system of exchange of goods. There is low monetization and there is exchange of goods happening between people here. So that is the basic concept of barter system. I'm sorry guys, am I live? Can everyone hear me? Okay. Okay, so where were we? We were at barter system. Sorry for the technical difficulties. So the barter system is a system of exchanging goods and services between two people or a couple of people. So basically, if you are a person having some grains, maybe rice, and then you need to buy an apple. So what do? You take your rice, go to the person having apple, and you exchange your rice for an apple, right? This is the basic barter system, is exchange of goods happening here. But then the barter system inherently has certain problems where, you know, the guy who's selling an apple may not necessarily want your rice. So and he may need some oranges. So what do you do then? So you go find someone who has an orange. Maybe person O has orange. So you buy the orange, giving him the rice, and then you buy the apple. So this concept is inherently called double cohesion of wants, where the wants match. So the guy who's selling apple should want your rice, and you selling rice want an apple. So that there's a double matching of your want. So that's why you're able to make that trade. But you can see, inherently guess this system is flawed and needs improvement. So that's why you came up with something called as coinage. So coinage, if you see the history of coinage in India, you see that the coins were there from the Vedic age, even pre-Vedic. There are certain studies which show that coins were widely in use. It became a standard use of trade, and these coins inherently were from precious metals like gold, silver, copper, and that's where they got their standard value set, and then that drives drives standardization in goods and services and units and measures comes in. So basically you need to know barter system is a system of exchange, and even today in South Asia, especially in India, Indian subcontinent, you can see a certain type of barter system in Jajmani system. So Jajmani system, for those guys who are taking sociology as their optional, will know it is a system of exchange of goods and services in a village. So it is still prevalent in Sri Lanka and India and certain parts of Pakistan, I've heard. And barter system is an inherent concept that is still in vogue today as well. There is this theory in economy where no country is self-sufficient. So every country needs trade to happy, to meet their own domestic needs, right? So you might have heard a lot of rare earth materials are being imported from China. China is one of the leading producer of rare earth. That is being mined and excavated because of growing demand in electronics and computers and especially mobile phones, which are used world over. Same way, earlier iron used to be a chief commodity that used to be in a great demand. Even it is in great demand even today, because a lot of your infrastructure activities depend on iron, right? So that's about barter system. Now moving on, we will classify about 6 types of economic system based on this barter system and the amount of money circulating in a certain economy. So you see, economy has evolved from barter system, but then there is the amount of liquidity or the amount of usage of currency or standard currency in an economy determines what type of economy it is, and basically flow of money in an economy. So we'll look at the first 3 right now. The first one would be the traditional economy, which I said inherently barter system kind of economies. You can find this in Andaman Nicobar tribes, some of those tribes like Unge, Jorwa, etc. You might have heard of in sociology and other places. I think some of them were in news a couple of years ago. And even in the Bushmen of Kalahari Desert, they all are kind of a traditional economy where it is exchange of goods and services between people. And these economies tend to be predominated with the primary sector. What is this primary sector? Primary sector would be your agriculture, fisheries, animal husbandry are your primary sector. So you need to know these terms. Economy has 3 main sectors, which is primary, secondary and tertiary. So the primary sector is agriculture, animal husbandry. Secondary sector is manufacturing. Manufacturing, as you see in the European history, there is the Industrial Revolution. Basically, most of these European countries moved from this primary sector into the secondary sector. People living in villages moved to cities, and the development of cities caused urbanization, and slowly the economy as well grew. You might have heard in Europe there was a system called feudal system, where there was a feudatory relation between the landlord and the peasants. So that kind of went away to the background, and the new economy, liquid economy, moved in. And then the concepts of liberty, equality, fraternity developed even further with the movement from primary to secondary. And the last sector is the tertiary sector. Tertiary, or the third sector of the economy, which is services based. Services based, we can see in India that we have jumped directly from primary to tertiary. We'll talk about this later, but basically you need to know that service sector is the tertiary sector, and most developed economies are having a lot of GDP generated from the service sector. How is the service sector generating so much economy? Primarily by IP, intellectual property. Like if you see, if you have an iPhone, behind it says designed by Apple in California, but it is made in China. So you see there's an inherent, economic meaning to what it says. So it has been manufactured in China, but it has been designed here in US. So basically you can see that China is the leading manufacturer of the world, and the US is the leading holder of intellectual property in the world. It used to be the UK, and US has slowly gained momentum and taken over from the UK. So you can see the basic inherent economics. So US, if you see, is a developed and the sole superpower in the world, and is a leading contributor to the tertiary sector, whereas China, which is also a really big superpower and an emerging one at that, is predominantly manufacturing based economy. So moving on from that, coming to traditional economy, is you have to remember that it is basically the primary sector, which is agriculture, animal husbandry and the likes, and fishing, and there is very little monetization. That means there's little circulation of currency in the economy. So that is the traditional sector economy. Then you come to slowly to command economic systems. What is this command economic system? You could have seen the USSR, the Russia uses something called as command and control economies. Even in India, it was partially a command control economy, where though India comes to the another level where it is called mixed economy. So command economy is where the resources of the land are owned by the state. Everything is owned by the state. So the communist countries, everything in the economy is owned by the state, and the state, even if you are running a business, can take over the business at any time they want for the social good. There is a centralized planning agency which sets 5-year targets and goals, much like our planning commission until recently, which was giving the targets and the goals and the sectors that the government has to focus on to develop the economy. There is abundant price control, so that the government can control inflation and also ensure that the people are happy. And then there is no free market. Everything is price controlled. The state fixes the prices. State gives the quotas of production. In India as well, there was the license quota permit Raj until 1990 when India opened up. So the license quota permit is like the state gives license for a company to open. It gives quotas of production. It gives permit for the company to sell it. So that is how the government used to control what was being produced and consumed in an economy, and at what price it was set at. So the next type of economy is a free market economy. Free market economy, you should immediately think about USA, where the government interferes very less in the economy, and businesses are allowed to grow and mature on their own. The prices and the market investments are determined by market forces. What is market forces? You have demand and supply. So demand and supply determine what corporates are going to invest in, or what people are going to invest in, and how these sectors grow. For example, if in US, if there was a huge demand for bread, then there would be a lot of money poured into the establishment of setting up bread factories, inherently bringing down the price of bread to the such point that there is very little profit to be made, and then that generates some kind of equilibrium in the economy where there is adequate amount of companies producing bread, and there is adequate amount of consumption of bread at a lower price. So you see, as supply goes up, so if a supply of a commodity or a good goes up, so prices come down of that good, right? So you could have seen this in so if you have grown up in the 90s or early 2000s, you could have seen this happening, especially in mobile phones. First, the supply was very low. You had imported phones costing, exorbitant sums of money, and then slowly as the manufacturing shifted to India, you could find better phones at a much lower prices. So that is one of the examples of increasing supply, decreasing prices. So you can't completely reduce price by overproducing it. That makes no sense, right? Why would a company produce it at so cheap rate and incur losses? So those companies shut down, right? So this, when the demand and supply are matched, it causes an equilibrium. So if you see demand supply, if you plot it, it causes an equilibrium at supply and demand, and if you plot supply and price, right? So this, sometimes when there is excess of supply, the curve shifts downwards like here, and then it causes losses to companies, and then these companies which are supplying more, or they are inherently bad and they are not selling well because of quality issues and some other issues, will tend to shut down. That is what is called as creative destruction, which was mentioned in the Economic Survey 2020. Like, there's a lot of churn in the market where companies are entering and shutting down, and new countries are further entering. So that gives innovation and dynamicity in the market, where companies can enter and exit if it is no longer profitable for them, and they are able to service the people at the equilibrium based prices. And in free market systems, you see there's a mobility of factors of production. What is factors of production here? Another bigger important term. Factors of production is your man, money, labor, capital. So all of them are mobile, highly mobile. So if you can see, manufacturing shifted from the northern latitudes down to southern latitudes, especially in China, Asia, even South America, and Mexico and Brazil, where the car manufacturing plants were set up, primarily to service USA. And this was because it was cheaper to procure or make these things here because of abundance of cheap labor and raw materials. So the capital also moved southern. So that's why you have huge investments of companies in China, in Asia, in India, in Brazil, in Mexico, setting up huge plants to service goods and services to the developed world as well as for developing world. So when you start making something inside an economy, it becomes cheaper, right? That was the whole thing, the whole motivating factor for Make in India program. So if you are a fan of Make in India, this is one of the chief drivers for it. Why should you pay a lakh of rupees for a well designed laptop when you can make one right here in your own backyard? It was the same with the mobile phones as well. When Nokia and Samsung, I think, set up their manufacturing facilities here in India, the prices of these phones really dropped. So that is one of the good byproducts of making it here in India. But the other byproducts would be, increased pollution, and there is an allegation for all these developed economies pushing down polluting industries into developing economies, where they are manufacturing dirty goods in the sense they are polluting the environment around us, basically the rivers, waters, emissions, the air around, and even the sound. So that's another part where we'll see the economic impacts, unintended consequences. The beneficial unintended consequences of free market, we'll talk later, is the invisible hand, which was talked about in 2012, 2013, where the invisible hand of the market was supposed to bring good for the people. So you can see there are different types of free markets. One is the turbo capitalism. What is turbo capitalism? Is basically a free for all. The government is very less intervention in the economy. Everyone is free to set up their own manufacturing facilities and free to produce goods as the market pleases. Casino capitalism, mostly seen in financial instruments, where it is highly speculative and highly volatile. Then you come to crony capitalism. Crony capitalism has been in the news for quite some time. What is crony capitalism? It's where the state or the bureaucrats of the state, influenced by businessmen outside, are giving undue advantages to these businessmen. Basically, if you're close to the state, you can grow your business bigger, is the whole concept of this. But it is inherently, opposite to what free market asks, which is a free market where there's no state help or input to a company to set up and function on its own independently. Then responsible capitalism is where you have concern for people, profit, and the environment. So this is called the triple bottom line approach. The triple bottom line approach basically gives importance for companies to look after their employees, look after their profits, as well as contribute to environmental upgradation and restore the environmental pristinity that we had before the industrial era. And then you have popular capitalism, which is basically again a free market kind of capitalism, where the government supports companies which are making goods for the people which are high in demand. So continuing with the economic system, next one would be a mixed economic system. Here this is very important for everyone because India is a mixed economy. Why did we adopt mixed economy? It was in thought of our first Prime Minister that we wanted the best of both worlds and walk the tightrope. We also made the non-aligned movement, which I don't think is India is very active right now. But the non-aligned movement was walking a tightrope between Cold War world, between the capitalism and the socialism or the communism of Russia, and we chose to walk the middle path, just like Buddha. So you should know about Buddha and NAM and the NAM summits, which are pretty important for the UPSC. So what is mixed economic system? In India, the land system is completely free market. Initially it was, and it was not taken over by the state, and people could own lands. And this actually prompted the first amendment, where property right issues came into the fore in the constitutional debates, where people wanted to have, unilateral right to property. So right to property is now not a constitutional right, but it's a legal right. So you can see this more in polity, NAM and the free market. Maybe I could do some videos on it later on if you guys need it. So coming back to mixed economic system, we have both command and free market. Certain sectors of the economy are left to the free market, and certain sectors of the economy right now it is just defense, atomic energy, space, which have been identified as core critical sectors, which are regulated by the state. And there were capital, like private capital in the free market economy, in, for example, in publishing newspapers, magazines. So there it was a free market. Here's an elaborate framework where we have already talked about this license, quota, permit, Raj, where the state controlled what a company which had been given license could produce and how much can it produce and where it can sell. Right now that has been dismantled with the LPG, that is the liberalization, privatization and globalization movement that happened in 1990, sorry for that. And that has led to our kind of pseudo free market, which you can see here in India today, with most parts of the economy opened up for external capital infusion as well as ownership. Next we come to open economies. What is open economy? You need to know what is open economy. It is important. Again, open economy, then you go to closed economy, which is the last one. Questions have been asked on this. We'll discuss one of these questions at the end of this lecture. So what is open economy? It is closely integrated with the rest of the world. Closest example to an open economy is Singapore. It is one of the free market, one of the pillars of free market is open economy. And Singapore has been a free market for quite some time. From the British colonization onwards, Singapore has been a free market base, especially in the Asia Pacific region. And its economy is closely integrated with the world's economies. So if anything happens to any other economy in the world, it affects that economy. It kind of happened in EU. It was not completely open, but then it's open in the European sense. So when Greece collapsed, there was this whole EU crash because of Greece. So that is one problem with completely open economies. If one fails, the others fail. It's like a domino effect. And it is integrated with the rest of the world by foreign trade agreements. So India is also entering into a lot of foreign trade agreement, bilateral trade agreement, multilateral trade agreements. We have entered it with South Korea, China, and many other countries for preferential trade, even in Sri Lanka. So moving on to closed economies. What is closed economy? It's where it is completely isolated. There is no trade at all. So there is no export, no import, and there is no contact of the economy to the outside world. So India was a closed economy till 1988-89, and then we opened up gradually from 1990 onwards. Actually, we started opening up from around mid of 1980s, and then slowly we could see greater opening up of the economy in India. So further we go on to certain other classifications, especially we have to look at this World Bank classification of economies. This is kind of important for UPSC, both prelims and mains. What does World Bank classify economies into? So there are different reports of the World Bank, and some of these reports classify the economies into low income countries, middle income countries, and high income countries based on certain income criteria of a country. So India is currently moved from low income to middle income. Even China is here. UK, US are in higher income categories. There are other classifications. We have like the developed, developing and underdeveloped countries. So here when we talk about developed, underdeveloped countries, you should know about Amartya Sen. He's a developmental economist who is pretty famous, and it is based on a combination of economic and socio-cultural factors like literacy, awareness, urbanization. You also consider demographic factors, life expectancy after birth. So you come up with a composite index of things that you classify in a country, and then you come up with this ranking. So developed, developing and underdeveloped countries. And India, as you can see, most of Asia falls in the developing countries, and then we move on to developed countries, which is mostly UK, US and certain parts of Europe. Now we come to the thing where India is called a dualistic economy. This is important. What is dualistic economy? We in India are primarily having growth from the service sector. If you can see the economic survey and the budget, we see about more than 50 to 60% of our GDP comes from the service sector, which is in tertiary sector. And there is one more anomaly in India where about 50 to 60% of the people are involved in agriculture. So this causes an anomaly. So you have a huge primary sector reliant people and a huge income from service sector, which is driving the economy. So it has features of both underdeveloped economy and a developed economy. So that is why it is called a dualistic economy. So that is an anomaly that is predominantly found in India, and the manufacturing sector is not great in terms of development in India. So we have skipped the step of moving from agriculture to the manufacturing and then to service. Instead, India has grown from an agriculture to a service sector jump. So that's a dualistic economy. Then certain other terms you need to know about is blue economy. Blue economy is basically fisheries and your sea-based income. And the green economy. Green economy is your inherent potential from your forest and natural resources. For example, Bhutan is a country which is already carbon neutral. What is carbon neutral? Basically, carbon neutral is where a country's emissions are being absorbed back by the country's flora and fauna. So do we have enough green cover to absorb all the emissions that has been emitted by the economy in a country is the question that is answering. So Bhutan is already carbon neutral, though other countries are aiming to be carbon neutral. We can see about this in a later video. Moving on, we'll come to certain economic terms. So economic terms, we can see first thing we need to know about is economic growth. What is growth? So economic growth, if you think about it, is the quantitative difference between 2 points of time about the country's production. So for example, in 2019, you produced 100 tons of cotton, and in 2020 you produced 200 tons. So that gives you a growth of 100% in a year, right? You have doubled your output. and that's your economic growth. Then you come to the development. So you need to know economic growth is different from economic development. Like I said, in developmental economics, you see about developed, underdeveloped, and least developed countries, or LDCs as they are called. Economic development is considering economic growth as well as human development. Human development in terms of fertility rate, your infant mortality rate. All of these form a greater aspect of human development, your life expectancy. So when you combine those two, you come to economic development. How much is your quantitative increase flowing down to the people so that they can improve their lives is the basic concept of economic development. So something called as trickle down economics, where there's economic growth and then there's money accumulated in certain sections of the society, then that trickles down to the common man, where this money is used to make factories in certain places, give employment to the people, and hence a person working in a manufacturing facility can earn more than what he could earn in farming by doing farming, and then hence can lead a better life, hence developing himself and leading to human development. So that is economic development. So you know the difference between growth and economic development. Now these two in turn influence the economic policy. What is this economic policy? Again, guys, it is the policy or a document or the vision of the government or a non-government organization. So there are a lot of non-government organizations also working for economic development in a country, be it in the social sector, the job creation sector, the entrepreneurial sector. There are a lot of NGOs who are working to give a skill set to those most vulnerable so that they can be employed effectively in an economy. So it can be government or non-government. It is aimed at generating growth and development. Growth and human development is something that you have to know. Now what is this Kuznets curve? So when we are talking about economic growth and development, you have to inherently know about this curve. Basically it says inequality, it maps inequality and per capita income. So you can see as per capita income rises, the inequality rises, but then as it continues to grow, inequality comes down. Basically this is the biggest argument for economic growth. So you have to have sustained increase in per capita income for your inequalities come down, right? So when in the past 2 decades, from 1990 to 2010s, you had growing per capita income because of your high GDP, and there was growing inequality, and we were somewhere on this curve here. So this could have been India. That means it left a lot of people out of it did pull a lot of people out of poverty, but it still left a lot of people in poverty, and it didn't trickle down the benefits of development, and hence there was a lot of unrest caused because of that. Right now we are somewhere between this, or maybe even sliding back, because per capita income, because of the COVID impact, cannot be expected to rise this year, that is 2020. Maybe we will be sliding back down this curve this way for a year or two, and then once again the growth will pick up here. So what main thing you have to remember is, as per capita income increases, your inequality goes down. So we need to cross this threshold. So how quickly does India cross from high inequality to high per capita income to high per capita income to low inequality is the big question. Japan had done it pretty swiftly over a course of about 5 to 10 years. So we should see what will happen in the future. So basically when you're talking about economy, so again you have a lot of trade-offs that you see. What is this trade-off? It is choices in policy. Basically, if you are going to build if you have some capital, if you are a government servant or the district collector, you are recommending for some improvement in the district and you have capital approved, you may want to build a school, or you want to build a hospital, or you want to do a sports center. So you are actually inherently looking at different options. If there is no school in the area, then maybe yes, this is a good option. If there is a lack of hospitals or very few hospitals in the area, this might be a good option. If there's already a school and a hospital, then you might go for building a sports center in your district. So that comes down to your trade-off. So if you build one, the others lose out. So for example, RBI always has a trade-off, because RBI currently is targeting inflation and it is set up to maintain price stability in the economy. Do you know what is the RBI inflation target? RBI inflation target is mandated to be around 4% plus or minus 2% right now for inflation. I will explain complete inflation in a later class. Basically, you need to remember that RBI should maintain inflation between 2% to 6%. So that is what this policy is translating to. And it should also, make a trade-off between growth. So how does RBI stimulate growth? Is because it pumps money into an economy. So if money is pumped by the RBI into an economy, people have more money. People have more money, that means a demand for goods and services go up, right? So when demand for goods and services go up, inflation goes up, basically. And then a good inflation is actually really good if it is around 6% to 5 to 6%, which is called like creeping inflation. 2 to 5% you can keep it as creeping inflation, and it's good for the economy and it helps the economy grow. But you could see in the past about 5 to 10 years ago, the inflation was going double digits, about 10% to 12%. That was the byproduct of having a lot of money pumped into the economy by the RBI. So that's why it has to see how growth is generated. So at that point of time, India was growing at 8 to 9% on an average, which was pretty good, and the RBI was having good economic control over it, but inflation was staggering about. Then you see in fiscal policy, we'll come to fiscal policy in a later lecture, there's fiscal prudence versus welfare. For example, right now, from the FRBM Act, what is the FRBM? Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act. According to that, the governments cannot have limits of borrowing, which is around 40 to 60%, I believe. So it has to be prudent. The government can't unilaterally take out loans for welfare or populist programs. But right now you see the government giving fiscal stimulus to the economy, so that will have impact on the economy in numbers, but then it also gives you a positive impact on welfare of the people. So government borrows and then spends on the people, basically, to generate better human capital as well as a welfare for the people. So there's always this question, right? Do you have to spend or do you not have to spend? And you should know the government is the biggest borrower in the Indian market. Around 80% of borrowing is done by the government of India. So that usually when the government borrows from the open market, it drives the interests up and it crowds out capital for the rest of the economy. The people cannot borrow more from the banks at a lower price. Hence, it will have a detrimental impact on the people and the growth of the economy. So even you can see the Land Acquisition Act. So the Land Acquisition Act actually brought up a base price for the lands acquisition for industries. This actually set up a standard, well calculated base for acquiring land, which was actually not favored by the capitalists, because it would shoot up their cost of acquisition as well as shoot up the cost of project, and hence shoot up the cost of the final product. So every day in the economy you're looking at trade-offs. Moving on, we will learn about opportunity costs. What is opportunity costs? For example, you are spending 1 hour looking at this lecture. You might have given up watching a movie, which was your second best option, but you're gaining something because you're appearing for a UPSC exam and this was one of your priority. So the cost of you giving up watching movie to watching this video is called an opportunity cost. So it's basically the cost of the second best option, right? For example, you are going to buy a car. You have a Maruti Alto, which is basic standard car, which should cost around 2 lakhs, right? But you really want to buy an i10, which is a little superior and gives better comfort, and you might really like how it drives, and it costs around 4 lakhs, correct? And then you finally decide and you buy the i10. Why? Because you like it. So your second best option was Alto, which was 2 lakh. This is your opportunity cost. 2 lakh was your opportunity cost to buy the i10, correct? So again, here you can see about cost benefit analysis in the other example that I gave on school, a hospital, and a sports center. Again you can see opportunity cost being played into all of these. If you give up school, what is the opportunity cost? Instead you build a hospital. If your school was the second best option and it would benefit the economy by generating about 1,000 crores, and the hospital was generating about 15,000 crores, so your second best option was this is your opportunity cost. So basically it's used to do a cost benefit analysis, and you would always go for something which would maximize welfare or maximize your profits. Next term that you need to know is macroeconomics, guys. Are you guys with me, or you have dozed off? Anyway, we will go on with macroeconomics. What is macroeconomics? Macroeconomics is the entire economy of a given unit. What is this unit again? Unit is your country or your state. You can even do village level, panchayat level. Oh, you should also remember, when I think about panchayats, the State Finance Commission actually gives the allocation between the state government and the panchayat. Keep this in mind for your prelims. It's the State Finance Commission, not the central government. Central Finance Commission gives the split between the central and the states, and the split between states and the panchayats are given by the State Finance Commission. So coming back to macroeconomics, it is the entire economy. Basically the whole Indian economy is a macroeconomy, and what do you use to measure this is the variables like GDP, size of economy. Do you know what is the size of economy? Please hit me up or comment on the video below, or you can just message me on the size of the economy. And other terms like unemployment, you have sectoral issues and all other things, which we'll talk about in a later class. Next term that you need to know is macroeconomics. What is macroeconomics? It is a subsection of macroeconomics. So microeconomics is a microscopic vision of the economy, where you can see a specific unit of economy. Basically, if you are in a company, you do demand analysis, market analysis. So these are microeconomic variables or studies that you're doing. So you see how much is the demand for a biscuit. So that's a microeconomic study. Consumer behavior. Will a customer choose a cream biscuit or a glucose biscuit? These kind of trivial things are microeconomics. Though I say trivial, if you are working in those sectors, it's not a trivial thing. It's a hard job to predict. And even for this video which I am making, will you watch it or won't, is a microeconomic question that I need to ask. Next, there is an emerging topic called mesoeconomics. It's a latest edition. When I was studying economics, that was in 10th standard. I was studying in ICSC, and then we had economic applications where my favorite subject was economics, and then now I am ending up teaching economics. So moving on, we have mesoeconomics. What is mesoeconomics? It is the sectoral level. For example, a government or some other outside agency conducts a study on the automobile sector of a country. So that is a mesoeconomics. So it's an intermediate level of economics. Next term you need to know is political economy. If you can see, please tell me. If you don't see, please ping me. I will adjust the recording. What is this political economy? Basically, when you have a mixed economy or a communist command and control economy, it releases the politics, actually play into what economy does. China is a biggest example of a politically controlled economy, because the economy of China is actually resultant of the decisions made by the Communist Party of China. So basically, this is politics plus economics equals policy decisions. So the politics are driving the policy decisions for certain economy. For example, your plastic ban. Plastic ban was initiated to steer the private investment away from harmful plastics into more environmentally friendly jute, cotton bags. So same way you could see bank nationalization that happened in 1969 and 1980 was mainly a policy decision, because the government felt these banks were playing to private interests and not expanding banking services and credit services to the rural economy. That is why you had set up, the banks were nationalized and tasked with a mandate to produce more banks or set up more banks. And there was this lead bank scheme where a branch of an existing bank was entrusted to set up 5 other branches in non-represented areas. So there was rapid increase in the number of banks in the economy and in India. So you could get everyone into the banking system. So right now that has culminated to the Jan Dhan Yojana, where people were encouraged to open Jan Dhan zero balance accounts. So that has been resulted into a massive success. So you can see from 1969, what was started as a bank nationalization to get people into banks or get services, banking services to every person in India, has culminated recently with the Jan Dhan Yojana. So from 1969 to 2019, almost 40 years to 50 years they have taken to get people educated and onboarded with the banking system. Same way the policy decision mandated the LPG policy. What is LPG policy? The liberalization, privatization, globalization policy, where India opened up from the mixed, why were a closed economy before? If you would have seen in history, we were a closed economy because the Swarajis in the Congress thought everything should be Desi and Swadeshi. Everything has to be produced in India and consumed in India. It was an after effect of Britain's colonization, where Britain was dumping its manufactured goods into India, and which led to a lot of livelihoods lost by artisans and craftsmen which has been argued that has destroyed the economy of India. So you can see on many people's videos where they explain the effects of colonization in economic terms. Again, policy decision you can see is a demonetization to eliminate black economy. So why was demonetization done? To eliminate black money. What is black money? It is not money that is black. So black money or the black economy is unaccounted economy, where if there was double billing done by various companies, that would the income from that double billing. So if you have billed twice but you still have one of the goods which you have told to the government that you have sold, you're selling it again unaccounted and you're making double the money, and it is not being declared to the government, so that goes into the black economy. So demonetization was aimed at that economy. Next concept you need to know is liberal economics. What is liberal economics? Liberal economics is what has been driving the Indian economy since its opening up in 1990s. Basically, it's on the concept called rational man. What is this rational man? That means people are inherently rational. You are not, influenced by emotional factors, and you buy. So if you go to a market, a rational man will buy the cheapest priced product. For example, you are going to buy a shoe polish. You have Kiwi shoe polish which is at 50 rupees, and you have some store made some black swan shoe polish at 10 rupees. A rational man will buy the 10 rupee shoe polish. Why? Because it is giving you biggest value for money. But an irrational man will go and buy the 50 rupee Kiwi shoe polish. Why? Because he has been using it for a long time. His father was using it, and and he never knew of the lower price shoe polish. Though it may be giving you the same amount of shine or quality difference, those are irrational again. So this leads to maximum demand at maximum value. So again we are coming back to the demand and price curves where there's equilibrium. So if everyone acts rationally in their own selfish interest, so the guy who buys the cheapest good, he will be driving what is called as the invisible hand in the economy. So if you are bringing up the demand of this 10 rupee good, this 50 rupee good maker will shut down, and hence everyone will be able to buy the good at this price, or maybe a little higher because demand has gone up. So inherently you are bringing the demand of the higher price good down and making or forcing the other companies to lower their price. So this is your invisible hand at play. Same way, when the price is lowered, more people can afford it, poorer section of the society is benefited. So that is the unintended beneficial byproduct of you acting in your own selfish needs. So that's the rational man concept. And here you need to know one more thing, that is the laissez-faire. What is laissez-faire? In French it means let people do what they want. Basically it is like turbo capitalism, or completely free market economy where the state is just maintaining law and order. Next comes neoliberal. So liberalism, when it came in late 19th centuries, Rousseau, Adam Smith is a great proponent of laissez-faire and liberal economy. So he had proposed it in around 1800s, late 1800s, 1900, early 1900s, where there was this liberalism emerged in Europe and it took over, and that's why you can see the utilitarian way. Chandigarh is the biggest example of liberal economics or neoliberalism. It was basically a utilitarian concept. It was called as the Bauhaus movement, form over utility over form, or factor over form concept, Bauhaus house concept. So that even in Russia, all the government buildings are kind of similar to what you can see in Chandigarh. Even in Bangalore, here we have the periscopic World Trade Center, Bangalore, which was based on that Bauhaus concept. Then so it went away in between. So liberal economics went away, and then it had its own resurgence again in 1970 when Margaret Thatcher became the PM of England or the UK. So this led to Thatcherism, or what is called as Thatcherism, where everything of the state was privatized. So in UK, most of the services of the state have been privatized. So but during that time, like 1970s, during when Margaret Thatcher was the PM in UK, we had our own Indira Gandhi as our PM here in India. So this in India, we had the opposite of neoliberal economics happening here. So we had the bank nationalizations and everything during this period. So here again it is the return of liberalism, 1970s, and then withdrawal of state, and early 2000s, right? This happened in India from the LPG era onwards. So from 1990 to 2001 is the neoliberal period. And this neoliberal economics has been propounded by the Washington Consensus. What is Washington Consensus? Your IMF, World Bank approach to free markets is the Washington Consensus, is the foundation for your IMF and your World Bank. So moving on, you need to know about few more terms. I hope I won't bore you. So certain more terms. Keynesian economics. What is Keynesian economics? You might have heard of these terms in the newspaper, in the news. What is Keynesian? It is similar to liberal economics, but basically you're pumping into the economy to kickstart spending. So this is what was done in the previous 5 years. Not previous, this 5 years, but about last 10 years. So your Narega, even your Bharatmala, your Gram Sadak Yojana are Keynesian economics, where giving money in people's hands so that they can spend it and lead to a greater economic growth. So when people have more money, they'll start buying more, hence fostering greater development. Then you come to a communist economy. This is similar to socialism or socialist economy. It's about degree. So complete ownership of national economy by government is communist economy. In socialistic economy, it's like mixed economy as in India, where certain parts of the economy are controlled by the government and the certain parts are free market driven. So that led to Nehruvian economics. It's basically a socialist economics with mixed characters. Then you have Gandhian economies is something which you have to know for, especially in terms of mains and essay writing, where you can use it to tackle economics based essays. So he came up with this concept of village based, completely self-sufficient economies, where the villages produce and consume their own goods, and he didn't actually ban external trade or making big companies. So he said you can make companies unless you can have this trusteeship. So if you have a company and it's making profit, it is held in trust of the people, of those people of that village, and you are supposed to distribute that economic surplus amongst the people and develop. So it is a completely decentralized approach. So it was not put into use, but it is what gives an ideal form or ideal type of situation where you want to have a completely decentralized economics. Then you go in for the Gandhian type of economics. Then we have talked about development economics, where it is mostly from newly decolonized countries like India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, where, as I said before, it is economic growth with human welfare. State capitalism or Beijing consensus, it's also called as socialism with Chinese characters. Basically, the government acts as a player in a free market and it controls the businesses and uses this free market for political capital. That is why we have the problems of state interference in data privacy, which you can see in the recent Zoom issue and the big fight between US and China in 5G technologies, and Huawei versus Cisco and other US companies happening because of data privacy issues, because of laws in China. Here you can see even state capitalism even in US and India happening when the government is stepping in to bail out banks. So it happened recently in India where the government was bailing out banks. The recent one is the Yes Bank, I think Yes Bank or ILFS, which was bailed out by India in certain way or the other, and the US complete bailout of banks like Lehman Brothers and others. So that is kind of state capitalism, but it's not like completely state controlled. There's still freedom of privacy, data, etc. Then you come to mercantilism. This is basically the economic thought that drove the European economies to come in search for India and other places for interest of trade. So basically it wants maximum exports and internally build up huge reserves of foreign exchange or gold. At that point of time in the 16th and 17th centuries, it used to be gold. So the economy or the nations used to build up gold as their reserve. Right now you can see this mercantilism playing in China's development. China grew mainly because it was export driven growth. There was early 80s to 90s, there was the Asian dragons. India sadly became growing later on, a decade later, but China, South Korea, Indonesia, Singapore grew during the 1980s, mainly because of export to the US. Japan did the same in the early 1900s. Then you have Trumpian trade wars. That is what I was talking to you about, where China and US are fighting over trade and other issues, a lot more issues rather than only 5G. Then where there are sanctions being put on China, even on Iran because of purported nuclear use by the country. And then you need to know about behavioral economics. This was Richard Thaler. He's the pioneer for it. He got the Nobel Prize, I think, for the work on behavioral economics. And this concept was actually used in Economic Survey 2019, social change through better implementation of schemes. This was called as nudge economics. Nudge economics, made the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan was actually a successful nudge economics in action, where there is social participation to clean the streets as well as bring better development. So what happens when you clean the streets? You have lesser incidences of cholera, diarrhea, other diseases caused by uncleanliness, and hence you develop the human lives. Same thing you can see in Jan Dhan Yojana. So it kind of nudged, everything was in place, the banks were there, the banking system had grown so much that they could service everyone, and then all it needed was just a nudge from the government to push people into the banking system. So that was successfully done by the Jan Dhan Yojana. Moving on. So that comes to the last part. We are going to ask you a question. So this was actually asked in UPSC 2011. So and it's related to the things which we talked about just before. So it's basically asking about closed economy, and it is what? Please let me know or leave a link or in the comments below this video. So thank you. I will come day after tomorrow with the second part of the series. I'm Amresh Nashi. Please like, share, subscribe. Happy to be with you.